Central life information, vegetable, animal.
My name is Sally Schwartz, and this is my story, Ashes to Ashes. Here's the kind of family I come from. When I was in 4th grade, my father and 2 older brothers and I worked as a team to take down the fraying basketball net and replace it with a new one. We took turns, my brothers and I, climbing the ladder resting against the garage, unhooking a few loops of fraying net, then climbing back down to let the next sibling take a turn. My father stood at the foot of the ladder, serving as both general of the operation and spotter. The net, after all, was regulation height, 10 feet above the asphalt driveway. We left out Betsy. As the youngest, there was an unspoken agreement she was always too young to participate in whatever we were doing. Instead of helping us replace the basketball net, she was playing in the yard, hopping up and down and doing whatever she could to get our father's attention. "I can do a cartwheel," she shouted. "Watch me, Daddy, watch me." At least, that's what I imagined she said. It was my turn at the top of the ladder where I was methodically unhooking the last of the disintegrating loops. I was busy ignoring my sister, which is what my father should have been doing as well. Instead, he turned to watch whatever passed as a 6-year-old cartwheel. In turning, he forgot about the ladder, and as I think about it now, he probably forgot about me. I don't remember the ladder slipping. I kind of remember falling a long way down in slow motion and landing flat on the pavement. I don't know how long I was unconscious, and I have no idea who flipped me over onto my back. What I do remember with cinematic clarity is regaining consciousness and gazing up into the faces of my father, 2 brothers, and little sister. All of them were laughing. Now, my family's not heartless. We're just prone to finding humor at things other people might not find funny. The point is, I didn't grow up in a gentle or even slightly sentimental household. No looking for fairies under mushrooms or believing a tooth left under a pillow was anything more than a business transaction. One could argue the logical extension of such an unmagical upbringing would include a healthy skepticism about the existence of God. One would be correct. The thing about questioning the existence of God is it leads to questioning religion. In the case of my family, questioning religion led to falling away from it, which led us away from ritualized ceremony. Released from these conventions, we indulged in a healthy amount of secular interpretation when it came to marking major life transitions. Put another way, when my grandfather died, he donated his body to science. No casket, no burial, no stone. When my grandmother died, there was some dissension among my father and his sisters about how to proceed. They agreed on cremation, but not on what to do with her ashes. Absent a consensus, the box containing the remains of Grandma Vera traveled around in the back of my father's Lincoln Continental for as long as he owned it. When he sold the car, he had the foresight to move his mother into the garage, where she sat in an unmarked cardboard box for another several years. Her eternal peace was interrupted during an epic Chicago blizzard. In an uncharacteristic gesture of storm management, my mother decided to salt the driveway. The box with the salt and the box with Grandma Vera happened to be resting side by side. In my mom's defense, the odds of scooping what she meant to be scooping were 50-50. Opening the twist-tied plastic, she plunged a coffee mug inside the box she'd opened and withdrew a heaping cup. Just before she started to sprinkle, a gust of wind caught the contents of the mug, and specks of gray ash rose into the air, joining the snowflakes in a frenzied swirl. "Holy fucking shit," my mother told us later. "I almost sprinkled Vera across the driveway." Now, what's the point of the story? Is it my father's inability to let go of his mother? Is it the sacrilegious nature of my family leaving my grandmother in a twist-tied bag in an unmarked cardboard box on a bench in the garage? Or is it the fact that my mother almost sprinkled her dead mother-in-law out into the snowy night, not as a sacred gesture of returning her to nature, but in hopes of reducing the accumulation of black ice? The point of the story is that when it comes to end-of-life ritual, my family has none. When I met Louis, I couldn't help but notice the large gold cross he wore around his neck. I pretended to be disinterested for all of 3 dates, after which I quit pretending. Tell me about your necklace. It's not a necklace, he said as his hand reflexively touched his necklace. It's the cross I got at my baptism. Our relation didn't go back that far. When we met, I was a middle-aged divorced woman, and Louis was a young widower. We were both 55. Meeting at that point in our lives, we hadn't traveled through any of the traditional marital milestones together, like having children, naming children, or wiping original sin from children. Funny story, Louis continued. When the priest found out who I was planning to marry, he excommunicated me. I let that sink in for a moment while I considered the few things I knew about this widower and his late wife. Were you kicked out because she was divorced or because she was Jewish? I wanted to know what constituted a deal-breaking transgression according to his former church affiliation. I knew by Greek Orthodox standards I would fail by either measure, but still, I was curious. Because she was Jewish. It was my turn to touch the gold cross hanging around his neck. And you still wear this? It's not about the church, Louis said. I think of it as a symbol of my spirituality, a belief in some kind of higher power separate from the church. The image of my grandmother's ashes sitting in the garage flashed in front of me. Maybe there was a tiny bit of room in my heathen existence for some kind of something, as long as it was disconnected from formalized religion. I wasn't convinced, but Louis was cute, and so I decided to overlook the discomfort I felt about his necklace. 3 years after we met, Louis and I got married. 4 months later, his father died. Our wedding could be described as freeform. George's funeral was not. For those still in good standing, the Greek Orthodox Church provides a year-long roadmap of ceremony for those leaving this world and entering the next. Though all of it was new to me, I was determined to show my new family that this lapsed Jew was all in when it came to participating in their customs. What I lacked in faith, I would make up for with good behavior. Taking my place next to Louis at the visitation, I stood just to the side of George's open casket while a steady stream of guests offered condolences. On the second day, my parents and siblings arrived. They moved together across the funeral parlor with appropriate solemnity, first past George, then toward each member of the immediate family, offering words of sympathy. My heart swelled with appreciation for their show of support. Then I watched as my family repositioned a group of chairs to form a tight circle. Sitting and facing one another, it took about 2 minutes before all of them erupted in laughter. It wasn't loud laughter. Whatever they found so amusing left them shaking with poorly muted, slightly embarrassed, hunched-over laughter. Tissue? I asked my grieving mother-in-law, offering her a box in hopes it would distract her. Then I excused myself from the line to reprimand my family, as well as to find out what was so funny. A week later, while standing in her kitchen and picking at some leftovers, I said to my mother-in-law, "I'm sorry about my family." "Sorry for what?" she asked. "I'm sorry about their behavior at the wake. When they were laughing, we sat down at the kitchen table. It was just the two of us, and I wanted to use the opportunity to explain my family's behavior as much as to apologize for it. They weren't laughing at George. They were laughing at my dad." Katina put her fork down. "Why?" I turned my chair toward the 85-year-old woman whose faith in her religion was unflappable. My family doesn't have a set ritual for funerals. I think it took my father by surprise how moved he was at George's wake. He appreciated seeing George resting in his casket, surrounded by flowers, with all of those people lined up to pay their respects. My mother-in-law smiled. He likes the way the Greeks do it. She said it kindly, like she was looking at a plate of dry chicken and was offering a piece of perfectly seasoned lamb instead. Like, why wouldn't you want what we're serving? He liked it a lot. That's what my father was explaining to the rest of my family at the funeral parlor when they were all sitting in a circle. He was telling them how much he loved the floral wreaths. The roses, they smelled nice, Katina said. And he thought George looked dignified in his suit and tie, but he felt it was a little too formal for his taste. For his own viewing, he wants to be dressed in an open collar and a V-neck. Katina nodded. That's okay. The more he kept explaining how he imagined his funeral matching George's wake, the more surprised everyone got. They were taking it seriously until my brother asked for clarification on the casket issue. He said, "Which half do you want open, Dad? The top or the bottom?" And that's when they all started laughing. I waited, expecting Katina to frown. Instead, she giggled. "It's okay. It's funny. I have a story." My mother-in-law began telling me about funeral customs in the village of Stadio, near Tripoli, where she was born. Long time ago, when somebody died, they keep the body in the house before it was buried. My turn to nod. The women, they stayed in the room with the body all night. To show respect, maybe to keep it company, I don't know, but was the custom. I kept nodding. One time, I don't know who died, but somebody's cousin, they did a trick. They tie a string around the hands of the body. Katina held up her arms, crossed at the wrist, to illustrate how the resting body would be positioned. Then late, very late, when some of the women were checking on the body, the cousin, he pulls the string. She demonstrated, and the arms of the deceased moving unexpectedly. Everybody screamed, everybody jumped. They thought it was a resurrection. She burst out laughing. She threw her head back in laughter. She laughed so hard, I'm certain she let go of some of her newly held grief. It's okay to laugh, she said, wiping a tear. Even at a funeral, everybody feels heavy. A little laugh is good. A few months passed, and then so did my Uncle Donald. Following our tradition of having no traditions, there was no service, no shiva, no nothing. My cousin Tommy told me he was hoping he'd at least get the ashes back in time to scatter them on Father's Day, but the crematorium wasn't promising anything. And whether or not my uncle's ashes made the deadline, I'll never know. If there was a memorial sprinkling, I wasn't there to see it. For the first time in my life, the absence of ceremony unsettled me. It also influenced my agenda for Father's Day. I made a point of going to my parents' house a few hours early, before the rest of the family joined for dinner. You're the best dad in the world, I said, giving my father a hug. And also, I need to know what you want for your funeral. We were outside on the patio that had been built where the old garage and the infamous basketball net used to be. Dad settled into a lounge chair and motioned for me to sit next to him. You're serious, aren't you? He said. I was. When you were at George's wake, you said you liked his open casket. Is that really what you want? It being Father's Day, the topic of his funeral hadn't been on Dad's radar. On the other hand, having known nothing for Uncle Donald was fresh in our minds. Dad assumed his deep thinking posture. Lower lip jutted out, head canted downwards, fingertips pressed together. After a moment, he looked up and said, I would like an open casket. Oh, for God's sake, my mother said. But I kept my focus on Dad. What else? Sitting in the sun with his eyes shut, my father started free associating while I took notes. In the course of about 30 minutes, he summed up his sense of himself, his view of the world, his knowledge of literature and music, and his favorite foods. His choice of music is a no-brainer, my brother Stephen said a few hours later. I was waving my notes in front of him. Gilbert and Sullivan, Pirates of Penzance. He wants us to play, I am the very model of a modern major general. Am I right? You are correct. Stephen continued, but the guy only knows 2 poems, O Captain, My Captain, and Ozymandias. He had to memorize both at Andover. I'm guessing he wants one of those to be read. I looked at my notes. Those are the 2 he listed. He's still deciding which one. He's gonna get back to me on that. Does he want a Shiva? My brother asked. Yes, he does. 3 or 4 days. He wants to make it long enough so that people will be able to fit it into their schedules. I'm assuming you know the menu? Stephen rattled off the list. Smoked sturgeon and borscht from Barney Greengrass, those little tiny salami sticks from Vienna, and maybe some chopped liver. We laughed, because we always laugh. Except sometimes I don't. When I remember it's my 90-year-old father who's on deck, and I imagine having to put my notes on his preferences into practice, I don't laugh. When I imagine what it will be like when the person my siblings and I are memorializing isn't there to outline his imperialistic theme for his funeral, I don't laugh. The reason it's easy to joke about the dress code for his open casket is because he's still deciding whether he should wear a blue button-down or a pink one underneath his maroon V-neck sweater. The kind of family I come from means there will be laughter when we mark the end of Dad's life. I imagine our laughter will build into roars and then into howls, helping let go some of our grief.